Tycoon leaves infertile wife only to return years later and find her with twins, Miss Chen. Mr. Ross is here for the merger meeting. Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Victoria's heart skipped a beat. She smoothed her silk blouse and took a deep breath, watching her reflection in the window. "Send him in, Claire." The door opened, and Alexander Ross strode in with the commanding presence that had made him one of New York's most formidable CEOs. At 38, his salt and pepper hair only added to his magnetism, and his tailored Tom Ford suit spoke of the empire he'd built. "Victoria Chan," he said, his deep voice carrying a hint of appreciation. "Your reputation precedes you." "Mr. Ross," she replied, extending her hand. The moment their fingers touched, an unexpected current of electricity passed between them. "I hope my reputation hasn't scared you away from our proposal." He laughed, a rich, warm sound that seemed to fill the room. "On the contrary, it's precisely why I'm here. Though I must admit, I expected someone older, male, less Asian," she challenged, raising an eyebrow. "More intimidating," he finished, his eyes twinkling. "But I'm beginning to think the rumors undersold you." Victoria gestured to the sitting area where documents were already arranged. "Shall we discuss how my firm can revolutionize your company's market presence?" As they sat down, the morning light caught Alexander's wedding ring, or rather, the absence of one. Victoria couldn't help but notice, just as she knew he had probably already observed her own bare finger. "Before we start," Alexander said, leaning forward slightly, "would you consider discussing this over dinner instead? I find business deals are better negotiated over good wine and conversation." Victoria felt her professional mask slip for just a moment. This wasn't in any of her carefully prepared scenarios. "Mr. Ross, are you suggesting?" "Please call me Alexander. And yes, I'm suggesting we continue this conversation somewhere less corporate. Unless I'm misreading the situation entirely." The butterflies in her stomach were decidedly unprofessional, but Victoria found herself smiling. "You're not misreading anything, Alexander. But you should know, I don't mix business with pleasure." "Then let's focus on pleasure and save business for Monday," he replied, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Little did either of them know that this moment, this simple meeting between two successful professionals, would set in motion a series of events that would change their lives forever. The merger they were supposed to discuss would pale in comparison to the merging of their hearts, and the empire they would build together would be tested by trials neither could have anticipated. Victoria picked up her phone, canceling her evening appointments with a few quick taps. 8 o'clock? I know a place in the West Village." 8 o'clock, Alexander confirmed, standing up. "I'm looking forward to getting to know the woman behind the reputation." As he left her office, Victoria turned back to the window, watching the city sprawl before her. Success she had, power she had earned. But something about Alexander Ross made her wonder if perhaps there was room in her life for something more. "I still remember the way you challenged me in that first meeting," Alexander whispered as they swayed to their first dance at the reception. The soft melody of "At Last" floating through the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. "That's when I knew you were the one." Victoria pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "And I remember thinking you were the most arrogant CEO I'd ever met." "Was?" He chuckled, spinning her gently. Their first year of marriage was a whirlwind of love, success, and shared dreams. Their penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park became their sanctuary, where they would spend Sunday mornings planning their future over coffee and croissants. "I want at least 3, Alexander would say, wrapping his arms around her waist as she stood at the kitchen counter. 3? Let's start with 1 and see how we handle sleep deprivation." Victoria would laugh, but her eyes would sparkle with the same dream. Every month, they would celebrate their monthivernary like teenagers in love. Alexander would leave little notes in her briefcase. "Meeting you was fate, becoming your friend was a choice, but falling in love with you was beyond my control." Their evenings were filled with intimate dinners, shared baths, and long conversations about their future family. They had even started decorating one of the spare rooms, painting it a gentle sage green that would work for any gender. "What about this crib?" Victoria would ask, showing him yet another option on her iPad. "Whatever you want, my love," he'd reply, kissing her temple. "As long as our baby is safe and comfortable." But as the months turned into a year, and then two, the sparkle in their eyes began to dim slightly. The spare room remained empty, the sage green walls serving as a constant reminder of their unfulfilled dreams. One night, as they lay in bed, Victoria turned to Alexander, her voice barely a whisper. What if something's wrong?" Alexander pulled her closer, his fingers tracing soothing patterns on her back. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes our way, we're a team." Neither of them knew then that their vows would be tested sooner than they thought, that for better or worse would take on a meaning they hadn't anticipated. The fairy tale was about to face its first real challenge, and their love, which seemed so unshakable in those early days, would be put through a trial by fire. Victoria closed her eyes, listening to Alexander's heartbeat, steady and strong against her ear. In that moment, she still believed in their happy ending, still trusted in the forever they had promised each other. But life had other plans, and the shadow of their struggles was already looming on the horizon, waiting to test the bounds of their love and the strength of their commitment. "Mrs. and Mr. Ross," Dr. Martinez began, her usual warm smile replaced by a professional mask that made Victoria's stomach drop. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Victoria felt Alexander's hand tighten around hers. The world seemed to slow down, every heartbeat stretching into eternity. "The tests show that Victoria's condition," Dr. Martinez paused, choosing her words carefully, "is more complicated than we initially thought. The damage to your reproductive system is extensive." "But there must be something we can do," Alexander interjected, his voice carrying a desperate edge Victoria had never heard before. "Treatments, procedures, anything." Dr. Martinez spread several charts across her desk. "The chances of natural conception are less than 1%. Even with the most aggressive IVF treatments, the likelihood of carrying a pregnancy to term would be..." Victoria didn't hear the rest. The room spun around her as the weight of those words crashed down. Less than 1%. The number echoed in her mind like a death sentence to all their dreams. That evening, their penthouse felt different. The sage green nursery they'd lovingly prepared now loomed at the end of the hallway like a ghost of what could have been. Victoria stood in the doorway, her fingers trailing along the wall. "We could adopt," Alexander said softly, coming up behind her. But something in his voice had changed. A distance had crept in, subtle but unmistakable. "Is that what you want?" Victoria turned to face him, searching his eyes for the unwavering love she'd always found there. "I want," he started, then stopped, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "I want what we planned, what we dreamed of. Our own family, our own children." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria watched as Alexander walked to the window, his silhouette stark against the city lights. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of shattered dreams pressing down on him. "Your mother called today," Victoria said quietly, already knowing what that meant. The pressure from his traditional family had been mounting with each passing month. "Victoria," his voice cracked slightly, "you know how important family legacy is to them. To me." She felt it then, the first real crack in their foundation. It wasn't just about having a baby anymore. It was about inheritance, legacy, the future of the Ross Empire. Things that suddenly seemed impossible because of her. That night, they slept on opposite sides of their king-sized bed, the space between them growing wider than just physical distance. Victoria lay awake, listening to Alexander's measured breathing, wondering if he was awake too, thinking about the family they would never have. In the darkness, she whispered so softly even she could barely hear it. "I'm sorry I can't give you what you need." The city lights flickered through their bedroom window, casting shadows that danced across the ceiling. Victoria watched them, feeling the weight of her diagnosis settling into her bones, not yet knowing that this was just the beginning of their trial, that the true test of their love was still to come, and that the path ahead would be more challenging and surprising than either of them could imagine. 3 years of marriage, Eleanor's voice cut through the carefully maintained silence, her crystal wine glass clicking against her plate. And still no news to share with the family? Alexander shifted uncomfortably beside Victoria. Mother, we've discussed this. No, Alexander, we haven't properly discussed this at all, Eleanor interrupted, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the mahogany table. The Ross family has maintained its legacy for 5 generations. Your father didn't build this empire for it to end with you. Victoria felt her throat tighten as she pushed her untouched turkey around her plate. Under the table, Alexander's hand, which usually found hers in moments of tension, remained firmly on his knee. Perhaps, Eleanor continued, her gaze fixed pointedly on Victoria, it's time to consider alternative arrangements. What exactly are you suggesting, Mother? Alexander's voice had an edge to it, but Victoria noticed he didn't immediately defend her. Richard Ross, Alexander's father, cleared his throat. Son, we've had our family lawyers draw up some options. The company's future needs to be secured. Victoria's fork clattered against her plate. The room fell silent. I think I need some air, Victoria whispered, pushing back her chair. As she walked toward the terrace, she could hear the conversation continuing behind her. She's a lovely girl, Alexander, but the Ross bloodline. The cold November air hit her face as she stepped outside, tears finally breaking free. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A message from Sarah. How's it going? Remember, I'm here if you need me. The glass door slid open behind her. Alexander's footsteps approached, hesitant. They don't mean to be cruel, he said softly, but didn't move to embrace her. Victoria turned, moonlight reflecting off her tears. Don't they? Your mother just suggested alternative arrangements at Thanksgiving dinner. Alexander. What's next? A replacement wife catalog? You're being dramatic, am I? When was the last time you defended me to them? When was the last time you told them that I'm enough, with or without a child? Alexander ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she once found endearing but now recognized as a sign of his internal conflict. You know how important this is to my family, to the company's future. And what about us? What about our future? Victoria's voice cracked. When did I stop being enough for you? The silence that followed was deafening. In the distance, a car horn honked and the city continued its endless symphony, oblivious to the marriage crumbling in this pristine garden. I should get back inside, Alexander said finally, adjusting his tie. They'll be serving dessert. Victoria watched him walk away, her heart breaking with each step he took. Through the window, she could see Eleanor Ross watching her, a calculating look in her eyes. The message was clear. Victoria was no longer just failing as a wife. She was failing an entire dynasty. Later that night, as their driver navigated through Manhattan streets, Victoria stared out the window, the city lights blurring through her tears. The space between her and Alexander in the back seat felt like an ocean, and she couldn't help but wonder if anyone had ever drowned in silence. Your mother's already picked out my replacement, hasn't she? She whispered. Alexander's lack of response was all the answer she needed. The sharp ding of the elevator made her heart leap, but instead of Alexander's familiar footsteps, a man in a crisp suit appeared, holding a leather briefcase. Mrs. Ross? I'm James Morton from Blackwood and Associates. Victoria's coffee cup trembled in her hand. She knew that name, Alexander's family lawyers. Please have a seat, she managed, her voice surprisingly steady. The lawyer placed a thick envelope on the kitchen island. Mr. Ross asked me to deliver these documents personally. With trembling fingers, Victoria opened the envelope. The words, petition for divorce, stared back at her in cold, black type. He couldn't even face me himself, she whispered, more to herself than the lawyer. There's also this, Mr. Morton said, sliding a smaller envelope across the counter. A personal letter from Mr. Ross. After the lawyer left, Victoria sat alone in her kitchen, the letter unopened before her. Finally, she broke the seal. My dearest Victoria, by the time you read this, I will be en route to London. The cowardly nature of my departure will likely confirm everything you've come to think of me these past months. And perhaps you're right. The truth is, I'm not strong enough to watch the light fade from your eyes day after day, knowing I'm the cause of your pain. The pressure of legacy, family, and duty has become a weight I can no longer bear to place on your shoulders. The divorce settlement is more than generous. The penthouse is yours, along with a considerable financial package that will ensure you never want for anything. I hope someday you can forgive me for not being the man you deserved, the man who could choose love over duty. Forever yours, Alexander. Victoria's tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. She reached for her phone, dialing Alexander's number with shaking fingers. Straight to voicemail. You promised, she whispered to the empty apartment. You promised we'd face everything together. The sound of her sobs echoed through the empty rooms. She walked to their bedroom, the bed still made from the morning he left, his pillow still holding the faint scent of his cologne. His closet stood open, half empty, the remaining clothes looking like ghosts of his presence. In a surge of anger, Victoria grabbed one of his expensive suits and threw it to the floor. As she did, something fell from the pocket, a business card for a high-end fertility clinic in London. The date of his first consultation was marked for next week. So that's your plan, she said to the empty room, her voice breaking. Replace the defective wife with a functioning model? She walked to the nursery, that damned sage green room that had become a mausoleum of their dreams. With sudden determination, she grabbed a chair and dragged it to the center of the room. Standing on it, she reached up and yanked down the mobile they'd bought in Paris, then the framed ultrasound pictures from their failed attempts, and finally the baby Ross sign they'd hung with such hope. As she stood in the midst of the destruction, her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Just heard. Coming over now. Don't you dare face this alone. Victoria sank to the floor, surrounded by the debris of her marriage. But as she sat there, something shifted inside her, a spark of defiance igniting in the ashes of her heartbreak. You think this breaks me, Alexander? She whispered to the empty room. Watch me rise. She didn't know it yet, but this ending was about to become the beginning of something far more extraordinary than either of them could have imagined. Did you hear? He left her because she couldn't. Such a shame. They seemed perfect. I heard he's already seeing someone in London. One particularly dark evening, Victoria sat in her office long after everyone had left, staring at the divorce papers she still hadn't signed. The city lights twinkled mockingly through her window, the same view she'd had when she first met Alexander. The sharp knock on her door startled her from her thoughts. Enough! Sarah Martinez strode in, her white doctor's coat still on from her shift at the fertility clinic. You haven't answered my calls in 3 days, and your assistant says you've been sleeping in your office. I'm fine, Victoria mumbled, quickly wiping her eyes. Like hell you are. Sarah dropped into the chair across from her, pulling out a tissue box from her bag. You look like you haven't eaten in days. And that's definitely yesterday's outfit. Victoria attempted a weak smile. Is this your professional medical opinion, Dr. Martinez? This is your best friend telling you that you're in a depression spiral, and I'm not watching you destroy yourself over a man who didn't deserve you. The harsh truth in Sarah's words cracked something in Victoria's carefully maintained facade. The tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally broke free. I don't know who I am without him, she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. Everything we planned, everything we dreamed. It was all tied to being Mrs. Ross, to being the mother of his children. Now I'm just broken. Sarah moved around the desk, pulling Victoria into a fierce hug. You listen to me, Victoria Chun, because that's who you are, who you've always been. You're the woman who graduated top of her class at Harvard, who built the most successful marketing campaigns this city has seen. You're not broken. You're just beginning. But I failed, Sarah. The one thing... Stop. Sarah's voice was firm. Your worth isn't measured by your ability to have children. And maybe this isn't the end of that dream either. Victoria looked up, confused. What do you mean? Sarah hesitated, then pulled out a file from her bag. There's something I've been wanting to tell you about. A new treatment we've been developing at the clinic. It's experimental, but the preliminary results are promising. Sarah, I can't go through more disappointment. I can't. This is different, Sarah interrupted, her eyes sparking with excitement. We're approaching infertility from a completely new angle. And you could be perfect for the trial. Victoria stared at the file, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. A tiny flicker of hope. But why me? Why now? Sarah squeezed her hand. Because you're stronger than you know. And because maybe, just maybe, the universe has a bigger plan for you than being Mrs. Alexander Ross. For the first time in weeks, Victoria felt something stir inside her. A spark of the determination that had once defined her. Tell me more, she whispered, sitting up straighter. Tell me everything. As Sarah began explaining the treatment, neither woman could have known that they were setting in motion a chain of events that would not only change Victoria's life, but would lead to one of the most extraordinary twists in the story of love, loss, and redemption. The city lights seemed to shine a bit brighter as they talked into the night, plotting a future that neither of them could fully imagine, one that would prove that sometimes the greatest love stories don't end with heartbreak, but begin with it. What you're looking at, Sarah explained, gesturing to a holographic display of cellular structures, is something we've been developing in secret for the past 2 years. We call it Project Phoenix. Victoria leaned closer to the display, watching the cells pulse with an otherworldly blue light. Phoenix? As in rising from the ashes. Exactly. Sarah's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. We've discovered a way to regenerate damaged reproductive tissue using a combination of stem cell therapy and bioengineering. The process essentially awakens dormant cellular mechanisms, giving them a second chance at life. Like rebirth? Victoria whispered, transfixed by the dancing lights. Dr. Martinez, a young researcher, interrupted, holding out a tablet. The latest results from Subject 7 just came in. Sarah grabbed the tablet, her eyes scanning quickly. A smile spread across her face. Look at this, Victoria. Subject 7 was diagnosed with the same condition as you. These are her results after 3 months of treatment. Victoria stared at the graphs, not fully understanding the medical terminology but recognizing the upward trends. This is working? More than working. We're seeing a 60% success rate in tissue regeneration. But Sarah hesitated, biting her lip. There's something else you need to know. They moved to Sarah's private office, where she closed the door and drew the blinds. The treatment isn't just experimental, it's revolutionary. And with revolution comes risk. What kind of risk? Victoria asked, her heart pounding. The process is intense. Your body will be pushed to its limits. There's a chance of complications and we can't guarantee success. Plus, Sarah paused, the medical board hasn't fully approved it yet. We're operating in a gray area of medical research. Victoria stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. Somewhere out there, Alexander was probably in London, starting his new life, perhaps already planning a family with someone else. What's the worst that could happen? She asked, her voice steady. Physically, organ failure, immune system complications. Legally, if something goes wrong, you'd have no recourse. This isn't a standard medical procedure, Victoria. You'd be our 8th test subject. Victoria turned back to face her friend. And the best that could happen? Sarah's face softened. You could have the family you've always dreamed of. But Victoria, this isn't about Alexander anymore. This has to be for you. Victoria touched the window, her reflection overlaying the city skyline. When I signed those divorce papers last week, I felt like I was signing away my future. But maybe, she turned to Sarah, a new determination in her eyes. Maybe I was just signing away my past. You don't have to decide now, Sarah said gently. Take some time to... No, Victoria's voice was firm. I've spent 3 years letting other people decide my fate. It's time I took control of my own story. She walked to Sarah's desk and picked up the consent forms. Where do I sign? Sarah watched her friend with a mixture of pride and concern. You understand that once we start, there's no going back? Victoria's hand was steady as she signed her name. Good, because I'm done looking back. As she dotted the I in her signature, neither woman could have known that this moment, this decision made in a quiet medical office on a Tuesday afternoon, would set in motion events that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about life, love, and the power of second chances. "When do we start?" Victoria asked, her voice stronger than it had been in months. Sarah checked her calendar. "We can begin preliminary testing tomorrow." "But Victoria..." She grabbed her friend's hand. "Promise me something?" "Anything. Promise me you'll remember that whatever happens, you're already whole. This treatment might give you a child, but it can't give you worth. You already have that." Victoria squeezed her friend's hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm starting to believe that." Finally, the setting sun cast long shadows across the lab, painting the medical equipment in shades of gold and promise. Outside, the city continued its endless dance, unaware that within these walls, a story of rebirth was just beginning. "Ready for today's round?" Sarah asked, leading her to the specialized treatment room they'd nicknamed the Phoenix Chamber. Victoria removed her blazer, rolling up her sleeve for the now familiar procedure. "As ready as I'll ever be. How are the latest readings?" Actually, Sarah's eyes lit up as she pulled up the holographic displays. "I wanted to show you something remarkable. Your cellular regeneration rates are exceeding all our projections." The blue light from the medical equipment cast ethereal shadows across the room as Sarah prepared the treatment. Victoria had learned to embrace the burning sensation of the specialized stem cell injections, each sting a reminder of her choice to fight. "You know," Victoria winced as the needle entered her arm, "I haven't told anyone about this. Not even my parents." Sarah monitored the vital signs displaying on the floating screens. "Are you afraid they wouldn't understand?" "I'm afraid they'd hope too much, like I did before." Victoria watched the golden-tinted serum flow through the four-line. "It's strange, for the first time. I'm doing this just for me. Not for Alexander. Not for his family's legacy. Not for anyone else's expectations." A sudden alarm blared from one of the monitors. Victoria's heart rate had spiked dramatically. "Breathe," Sarah commanded, quickly adjusting the flow rate. "Remember what we discussed about staying calm during the procedure?" Victoria closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing. "Tell me again about the theory behind this treatment. It helps me stay centered." Sarah's voice took on the soothing tone she reserved for these moments. "The Phoenix Protocol works by reactivating dormant stem cells in your reproductive system. Think of it like waking up sleeping soldiers in your body, teaching them to rebuild what was damaged." "And the genetic material?" Victoria asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah hesitated before answering. "The preserved embryonic tissue from your previous IVF attempts is responding remarkably well to the new protocol. It's almost as if..." She stopped abruptly as another alarm sounded, this one different from the first. "Sarah?" Victoria's voice held a note of concern. "What's happening?" "Don't move," Sarah ordered, her fingers flying over the holographic controls. "Your body's acceptance rate just jumped to levels we've never seen before. It's like your cells are dancing." Through the window, the rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, seeming to pulse in rhythm with the beeping monitors. Victoria felt a strange warmth spreading through her body, different from the usual treatment sensations. "Is this normal?" she asked, watching the numbers on the screens climb higher. Sarah's face was illuminated by the data streams, her expression a mixture of amazement and scientific curiosity. "Nothing about you has been normal, Victoria. You're rewriting everything we thought we knew about this procedure." As the treatment concluded, Victoria sat up slowly, feeling somehow different, lighter, perhaps, or more alive. She caught her reflection in the chrome surface of a nearby machine. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with an inner fire that had been missing for so long. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, gathering her things. Sarah caught her arm. "Victoria, wait, there's something else." She pulled up a new set of data points. "These readings, they're unprecedented. I think we need to discuss the possibility that..." But before she could finish, her pager buzzed urgently. "Emergency in Lab 3. We'll continue this tomorrow?" Victoria nodded, watching her friend rush out. As she prepared to leave, she paused by the window, placing her hand on her abdomen. Something felt different today, a whisper of change, perhaps, or the first notes of a symphony about to begin. Little did she know, in that quiet moment between dawn and day, that her body was already harboring a secret that would change everything. A secret that would bring both miracle and mayhem into her carefully reconstructed world. Her phone buzzed, another missed call from the office. She'd been delegating more responsibilities lately, unable to maintain her usual grueling schedule. The secret was becoming harder to keep. Reaching a secluded bench, she collapsed onto it, pressing her hands against her temples. A jogger passed by, giving her a concerned look. "I'm fine," she whispered to no one in particular, even as another wave of nausea hit her. Her phone rang again, Sarah this time. "Where are you?" Sarah's voice was tense. "You missed this morning's treatment. I couldn't make it to the clinic. The symptoms are getting worse, Sarah. Yesterday, I nearly fainted during a board meeting. A heavy silence filled the line. Come to the clinic. Now." An hour later, Victoria lay on the examination table, the familiar hum of machines surrounding her. Sarah's face was illuminated by the blue glow of the monitoring equipment, her expression unreadable. "Your body is fighting the treatment," Sarah said finally, showing Victoria the latest scans. "These red areas indicate significant stress on your system. We need to consider stopping." "No." Victoria sat up abruptly, ignoring the room spinning. "We can't stop now. I can handle it. This isn't about being strong enough, Victoria. Your body is. My body has failed me my entire life," Victoria interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "For once, just once, I needed to fight through this." Sarah sat beside her friend, taking her trembling hands. "Look at me. What you're experiencing, it's not just side effects. Your body is changing in ways we didn't anticipate." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "The cellular regeneration isn't just affecting your reproductive system anymore. It's like your entire body is rewiring itself. We've never seen anything like this in our other subjects." Through the window, storm clouds gathered over Manhattan, matching the turmoil Victoria felt inside. She pressed her hand against her abdomen, feeling the strange warmth that had become constant. "Last night," she whispered, "I dreamed I was holding a baby. 2 babies. Felt so real, Sarah. When I woke up, I could still feel their weight in my arms." Sarah's expression shifted, a mix of concern and something else. Wonder, perhaps. She turned to her computer, pulling up a complex series of charts. "These are your hormone levels from the past week. They're extraordinary. If I didn't know better, I'd say..." A crash of thunder interrupted her words, making both women jump. The lights flickered ominously. "Say what?" Victoria pressed, her heart pounding. Sarah took a deep breath. "We need to run more tests." "But Victoria, if these readings are correct, something unprecedented is happening inside you. The question is, are you ready for what that might mean?" Victoria stood up, walking to the window. Lightning illuminated the city skyline, casting dramatic shadows across her face. In that flash of light, she caught her reflection, pale, certainly, but with an otherworldly glow about her that hadn't been there before. "I've lost everything I thought I wanted," she said quietly. "My marriage, my dreams, my carefully planned future. Maybe this is the universe's way of showing me a different path." Sarah joined her at the window. "This path could be dangerous. We're in uncharted territory now. Then we'll chart it together." Victoria turned to her friend, a new determination in her eyes. "Whatever's happening to me, whatever this treatment is doing, I need to see it through." As if in response, another bolt of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. In that moment, Victoria felt something shift inside her. A flutter so faint it might have been imagination, but somehow she knew it was more. Much more. What neither woman realized was that this stormy afternoon marked a turning point. The moment when their experimental treatment stopped being just a medical procedure and became something else entirely. A miracle in the making, with consequences that would ripple through their lives in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victoria nodded, unable to form words. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of secret appointments, mysterious symptoms, and a hope so fragile she dared not speak it aloud. As Sarah moved the wand across Victoria's abdomen, the room filled with a rhythmic whooshing sound. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Is that? Sarah's eyes widened, fixed on the screen. A heartbeat. My God. Victoria. It's a heartbeat. Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks as she turned to look at the monitor. There, in grainy black and white, was undeniable proof of life. But wait, Sarah's voice took on a note of confusion. She moved the wand slightly. There's another one. Victoria's grip on the edge of the table tightened. Another what? Another heartbeat. Sarah's voice was filled with awe. Victoria, you're carrying twins. The world seemed to stop spinning. Victoria stared at the screen, at the two tiny flickering lights that represented lives she had longed for but never dared to truly expect. How is this possible? She whispered, her voice trembling. Sarah shook her head, still moving the wand to capture different angles. The treatment, it must have reactivated more than we anticipated. Both embryos took. It's unprecedented. Victoria's mind raced. Twins. 2 babies. 2 heartbeats. The dream she had months ago flashed through her mind. The weight of 2 infants in her arms. Are they okay? She asked, fear suddenly gripping her heart. Sarah studied the screen intently, taking measurements and checking vitals. From what I can see, they're developing perfectly. But Victoria, she turned to face her friend, her expression serious. This pregnancy is high risk. Not just because of the twins, but because of the experimental nature of the conception. We're in uncharted territory. Victoria nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. What do we do now? We'll need to monitor you closely, more closely than any other pregnancy I've ever overseen. And Sarah hesitated. We need to consider going public with the treatment's success. The medical community needs to know about this breakthrough. The thought of her private struggle becoming public knowledge sent a shiver down Victoria's spine. She thought of the media frenzy that would ensue, of Alexander possibly finding out. Not yet, she said firmly. Please, Sarah. Let me have this miracle to myself just for a little while longer. Sarah nodded, understanding. She turned off the machine, the room falling into silence save for Victoria's shaky breaths. You know what this means, don't you? Sarah asked softly, helping Victoria sit up. Victoria placed her hands on her still flat abdomen, feeling a surge of protectiveness for the 2 lives growing within her. It means I'm going to be a mother. It means more than that, Sarah said, her eyes shining with a mixture of scientific excitement and genuine happiness for her friend. It means you've just rewritten what we thought was possible. You're carrying the future, Victoria. Not just your own, but potentially for countless women who've lost hope. As Victoria dressed, her mind swam with the implications of what was happening. She was no longer just Victoria Chun, successful businesswoman and ex-wife of Alexander Ross. She was now a miracle, a scientific breakthrough, and a mother-to-be, all rolled into one. Stepping out of the clinic, the bustling New York street seemed different somehow. The world was the same, but she had changed irrevocably. Each face she passed held the potential of a future touched by this miracle growing inside her. Little did she know that across the ocean, events were unfolding that would soon collide with her carefully guarded secret, setting in motion a chain of events that would test her in ways she could never have imagined. The true challenge was just beginning. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Sarah asked, concern etched on her face. We could wait a few more weeks. Victoria shook her head, her hand resting protectively over her now visible baby bump. We've come too far to back out now. They're strong, Sarah. Can feel it. The door opened, and a team of doctors and nurses filed in, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was more than just a delivery. It was a medical milestone. Mrs. Chun, the lead obstetrician, said, "We're ready to begin. Remember, at any sign of distress." "I know," Victoria interrupted, her voice steady. Do whatever you need to save my babies. As the anesthesia began to take effect, Victoria's mind drifted to the tumultuous months that had led to this moment. The secrecy, the physical toll, the nights spent talking to her unborn children, promising them a world of love and wonder. The procedure seemed to last an eternity. Through the haze of medication, Victoria heard snippets of conversation, heart rate dropping on baby, increased cellular activity in the placenta. I've never seen anything like this. Then, suddenly, a cry pierced the air, followed by another. They're here. Sarah's voice broke through Victoria's fog. Victoria, they're here and they're perfect. Tears streamed down Victoria's face as two tiny bundles were placed on her chest. She looked down at her children for the first time. A boy and a girl, their faces scrunched and red, but undeniably beautiful. "Hello, Emma," she whispered to her daughter. "Hello, Ethan," she said to her son, the names she'd chosen in secret, whispering them to her growing belly in the dark of night. As the medical team bustled around, taking readings and running tests, Victoria felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. These children were more than just babies. They were miracles, the result of cutting-edge science and a mother's unyielding determination. Sarah leaned in, her eyes shining with tears. "They're showing unprecedented health markers, Victoria. Whatever the treatment did, it's given them an extraordinary start." Victoria nodded, unable to take her eyes off her children. In that moment, all the pain, the loneliness, the heartbreak of the past faded away. She was complete. As dawn broke over New York City, news of the miraculous birth began to spread through the medical community. In a London high-rise, Alexander Ross's phone buzzed with an incoming call from his mother. "Alexander, darling," Eleanor Ross's voice was breathless with excitement. "You won't believe what I've just heard. It's about Victoria, back in the hospital room, oblivious to the storm that was about to break." Victoria held her children close. "Welcome to the world, my little phoenixes," she murmured. "Our adventure is just beginning." Little did she know how true those words would prove to be. As Emma and Ethan took their first breaths, the world around them was shifting. Alliances were forming and breaking, and a chain of events was set in motion that would challenge everything Victoria thought she knew about love, family, and the power of second chances. The twins' birth was not just a new chapter in Victoria's life. It was the opening of a whole new book, one filled with joy, danger, and discoveries that would reshape the very fabric of what it meant to be human. "Mommy, look," Emma held up a drawing, her eyes sparkling with an intelligence that still took Victoria's breath away. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Victoria smiled, marveling at the complexity of the sketch. At 3, Emma was already drawing with the skill of a much older child. Ethan, not to be outdone, was busy constructing an intricate tower with his building blocks, his tiny brow furrowed in concentration. Victoria turned back to her computer, scanning the latest financial reports of her newly launched tech startup, Phoenix Innovations. What had started as a small venture to keep her mind occupied during her pregnancy had blossomed into a cutting-edge company at the forefront of biotechnology. A notification popped up on her screen, another offer for a merger, this time from a major pharmaceutical giant. Victoria sighed, closing the email without responding. The vultures had been circling for months, all eager to get their hands on the revolutionary technology she'd developed. Her phone buzzed, a message from Sarah. "Turn on the news. Now!" Heart racing, Victoria grabbed the remote, quickly changing the channel. The twins, sensing her tension, stopped playing and looked up at the screen. In a groundbreaking announcement today, the news anchor reported, researchers at London's Wellcome Trust have revealed a major breakthrough in fertility treatments. The new procedure, dubbed Genesis Protocol, promises to help women with even the most severe cases of infertility conceive. Victoria's blood ran cold. The images on the screen showed a state-of-the-art lab that looked eerily similar to the one where she had undergone her treatments. Leading the research team is Dr. Jonathan Blackwell, formerly of New York's. Victoria muted the TV, her mind racing. Jonathan had been part of Sarah's team, privy to the early stages of her treatment. He'd left abruptly, citing personal reasons. Mommy? Ethan's small voice broke through her thoughts. Are you okay? Victoria forced a smile, pulling both children into her lap. I'm fine, my loves. Mommy just has some work to do. As the twins settled back into their play, Victoria dialed Sarah's number with shaking hands. Did you see it? Sarah's voice was tense. I saw. Sarah, how much did Jonathan know? Enough to be dangerous. But Victoria, there's more. The Welcome Trust. It's funded by Ross Enterprises. Victoria finished, the pieces falling into place. Alexander's company. A heavy silence fell between them. What do we do? Sarah finally asked. Victoria looked at her children, her miracle babies, products of a science that the world was now racing to replicate and control. We fight, Victoria said, her voice steely with determination. I didn't come this far, create this miracle, just to have it taken away or exploited. As she hung up, Victoria's mind was already formulating a plan. She'd built her company from nothing, balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship with the strength she didn't know she possessed. Now, she'd have to use every ounce of that strength to protect her children and the revolutionary science that brought them into the world. Emma, Ethan, she called softly. The twins looked up, their eyes so wise, so trusting, meeting hers. How would you like to go on an adventure? Their faces lit up with excitement, unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. As Victoria began to pack, her resolve hardened. She had rewritten the rules of nature to bring her children into the world. Now, she would rewrite the rules of business and power to keep them safe. Little did she know that across the ocean, Alexander Ross was receiving a report that would set him on a collision course with the family he had abandoned. The battle for the future of fertility, and for the extraordinary children at the heart of it all, was about to begin. Victoria stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, her reflection in the glass showing a woman far removed from the broken-hearted divorcee of 3 years ago. Are you sure about this, Raj? She asked, her voice low to avoid waking the twins. Positive, came the reply from her head of security. Our sources confirm that Ross Enterprises is planning a hostile takeover of Phoenix Innovations. They're moving fast, Victoria. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. And the other matter? The DNA request? Is definitely from them. They're trying to prove paternity. Victoria's grip on the phone tightened. They can't possibly know. Maybe not, but they suspect. The timing of the births, the sudden success of your company. It's raising questions. A soft whimper from Ethan's room caught her attention. Victoria moved quietly down the hallway, peeking in to see her son tossing in his sleep. Shoo, my love, she whispered, gently stroking his hair. Ethan settled, his face peaceful once more. Returning to her office, Victoria's resolve hardened. Implement Plan Omega, Raj, and contact Sarah. We need to move up the timeline on Project Firewall. Victoria, Raj's voice was hesitant. Plan Omega will effectively erase Phoenix Innovations from existence. Everything you've built can be rebuilt, she finished. But my children's safety is non-negotiable. After ending the call, Victoria sank into her chair, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. She opened her desk drawer, pulling out a worn photograph of her and Alexander on their wedding day, both beaming with hope for the future. Oh, Alexander, she whispered to the empty room. What have you set in motion? A soft knock at the door startled her. Emma stood there, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Mommy? I had a dream. Victoria quickly tucked the photo away, opening her arms. Come here, sweetheart. Tell me about it. As Emma curled up in her lap, Victoria marveled at how much her daughter resembled Alexander. The same determined set of the jaw, the same inquisitive eyes. There was a man in my dream, Emma murmured. He looked sad. He was looking for something. Victoria's heart raced. What was he looking for, honey? Emma looked up, her eyes unervingly wise. Us, Mommy. He was looking for us. A chill ran down Victoria's spine. The twins had always shown signs of extraordinary intuition. But this, it was just a dream, love, Victoria soothed, even as her mind whirled with implications. Let's get you back to bed. As she tucked Emma in, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. It's done. Firewall is active. Are you sure about this? Victoria looked at her sleeping children, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the night light. In that moment, she knew there was nothing she wouldn't do to protect them. I'm sure, she typed back. There's no going back now. Returning to her office, Victoria initiated a series of commands on her computer. Across the city, servers hummed to life, beginning the process of encrypting and dispersing the data that held the secrets of the twins' extraordinary origins. As the progress bar slowly filled, Victoria allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Tears slipped down her cheeks for the life she once had, for the battles ahead, and for the innocent children sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering around them. But as the first light of dawn broke over the city, Victoria wiped her tears away. She was no longer just a mother or a CEO. She was a guardian, a protector of a secret that could change the world. Little did she know that at that very moment, in a London high-rise, Alexander Ross was staring at a report that would shatter his world and set him on a collision course with the family he had left behind. The game was changing, and the stakes were higher than ever. This can't be right, he muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. It's impossible. His assistant, James, cleared his throat nervously. I've triple-checked the sources, sir. The information is accurate. Alexander's eyes darted back to the glossy magazine spread before him. Pioneering CEO and single. Mother. Victoria Chen's inspiring journey. The headline seemed to mock him, but it was the accompanying photo that had turned his world upside down. Victoria, looking more radiant than he'd ever seen her, stood flanked by two children, a boy and a girl, both around 3 years old. Children who, if the article was to be believed, were born less than a year after their divorce. The timing, Alexander whispered, his voice hoarse. It's not. It can't be. Sir, James ventured cautiously, given the circumstances of your separation and Miss Chen's medical history, perhaps we should consider the possibility that what? Alexander snapped, whirling to face his assistant. That the woman I left because she couldn't have children miraculously gave birth to twins mere months after I walked away. The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander turned back to the window, his reflection staring back at him, a man haunted by the ghosts of his past decisions. What else do we know about these children? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. James consulted his tablet. Emma and Ethan Chun, born at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. Their birth records are unusually well protected. And sir, there's more. Ms. Chen's company, Phoenix Innovations, has been making waves in the biotech industry. Their research in cellular regeneration is years ahead of anything else on the market. Alexander's mind raced. Cellular regeneration, the field he'd been pouring millions into since. Get me Dr. Blackwell, he ordered, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. Now. As James hurried out, Alexander picked up the magazine, his fingers tracing the faces of the children. The boy, Ethan, had his eyes, and Emma, her smile was all Victoria. His phone buzzed, a message from his mother. Have you seen the article? We need to talk. Alexander ignored it, his gaze fixed on the family he'd never known he had. A family that, by all medical accounts, shouldn't exist. Dr. Blackwell's face appeared on the video screen, looking nervous. Mr. Ross, did you know? Alexander's voice was dangerously low. When you came to me with the Genesis protocol, did you know about Victoria's children? The doctor's hesitation was all the confirmation he needed. I want everything you have on Victoria Chen's medical history, and I mean everything, Alexander demanded. And book me on the next flight to New York. As he ended the call, Alexander's eyes were drawn back to the photo, to the family that should have been his, to the miracle he had walked away from. Oh, Victoria, he whispered, a mix of emotions flooding through him, regret, anger, and something else he couldn't quite name. What have you done? Outside his office, the London traffic continued its endless flow, oblivious to the storm brewing within. Alexander Ross, the man who had built an empire on calculated decisions, found himself facing the most irrational and powerful force in the universe, the possibility of a family he never thought he could have. As he began to pack for New York, Alexander was unaware that his actions had already set off alarms in Victoria's carefully constructed world. The chess pieces were moving, and the game that was about to unfold would challenge everything both of them thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. Alexander Ross sat rigid in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the tablet in his hands. The screen displayed a dossier on Victoria's life since their divorce, her meteoric rise in the biotech industry, the birth of the twins, the patents filed under Phoenix Innovations. "We're here, sir," his driver announced as they pulled up to a towering glass skyscraper emblazoned with the Phoenix logo. Alexander took a deep breath, straightening his tie. "Wait here. This shouldn't take long." As he strode through the lobby, heads turned. Even after 3 years away from New York, Alexander Ross was still a figure that commanded attention. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Ross, do you have an appointment?" "No," he replied curtly, "but I'm quite certain Ms. Chan will want to see me." Before the flustered receptionist could respond, the elevator doors opened and Victoria stepped out, her face a mask of calm that belied the storm of emotions beneath. Time seemed to stand still as their eyes met. Victoria's heart raced, her mind flashing back to the last time she'd seen those eyes in the faces of her children just this morning. "Alexander," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her core. "This is unexpected, is it?" he countered, his gaze intense. "I think we both know this conversation is long overdue." The tension in the lobby was palpable. Employees whispered behind their hands, recognizing the man who had once been New York's most eligible bachelor. Victoria gestured towards the elevator. "My office. Now." The ride-up was silent, charged with unspoken accusations and buried emotions. As the doors opened to the executive floor, Victoria led the way to her corner office, a space that rivaled Alexander's in both size and view. Still aiming for the top, "I see," Alexander remarked, taking in the awards and accolades lining the walls. Victoria's laugh was sharp. "Did you expect anything less?" She moved behind her desk, a physical barrier between them. "Why are you here, Alexander?" He pulled out the magazine, tossing it onto her desk. The smiling faces of Emma and Ethan looked up at them. "I think you know why," he said, his voice low. "Those children. They're mine, aren't they?" Victoria's hand instinctively moved to the photo, her fingers tracing the outlines of her children's faces. "They're mine, Alexander. You gave up any claim to them the day you walked out." "Damn it, Victoria." Alexander's composure cracked. "You were told you couldn't have children. We tried for years. And then, what? Less than a year after I leave, you miraculously give birth to twins." Victoria's eyes flashed with a mixture of pain and defiance. "Miracles happen, Alexander. Though I wouldn't expect you to understand that. You never did have faith in anything you couldn't control." Alexander stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I want a DNA test." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Victoria's mind raced, knowing that a DNA test would reveal far more than just paternity. It would expose the extraordinary nature of the twins' conception, the secret she'd guarded so fiercely. "No," she said firmly, standing to meet his gaze. "You lost the right to make demands the moment you chose your family's legacy over our marriage." Alexander's jaw clenched. "I'll go to court if I have to, Victoria. Those children are happy, healthy, and loved," she interrupted. "Which is more than I can say for how I was when you left." A tense silence fell between them. Outside the office, New York continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding high above its streets. Alexander's phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Blackwell. "Preliminary results are in. You need to see this." He looked back at Victoria, seeing for the first time the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. The woman before him was not the same one he'd left behind. She was stronger, more determined, and hiding something monumental. "This isn't over," he said softly, moving towards the door. Victoria's voice stopped him. "It was over the day you left, Alexander." Don't make the mistake of thinking you can walk back into our lives now. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Alexander's mind whirled with questions. He'd come seeking answers, but had only found more mysteries. What had happened in the years he'd been gone? What was Victoria hiding? And most importantly, what would he do now that he knew he had a family? A miraculous, impossible family that he'd unknowingly walked away from? As his car pulled away from Phoenix Innovations, neither Alexander nor Victoria realized that their confrontation had set in motion a chain of events that would not only change their lives, but potentially alter the course of human history itself. They're getting stronger, aren't they? Sarah's voice broke through Victoria's reverie. The two women sat on a bench, their casual posture belying the weight of their conversation. Victoria nodded, a mixture of pride and fear coursing through her. Ethan solved a college-level math problem yesterday. For fun. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. And Emma? She knew the delivery man was coming before he arrived. Said she felt him approaching. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. The twins' abilities were accelerating faster than they had anticipated. We need to move up the timeline on Project Sanctuary, Sarah whispered, her eyes darting around to ensure they weren't overheard. If Alexander's appearance is any indication, we're running out of time. Victoria's hand clenched around the edge of the bench. He's not going to stop, Sarah. You should have seen his eyes when he looked at their picture. He knows they're his, but he doesn't know what they are, Sarah countered. What they could become. A shout from the playground drew their attention. Ethan stood at the top of the jungle gym, his arms outstretched. For a heart-stopping moment, it almost looked as if he were about to fly. Ethan, no, Victoria called out, her voice tight with panic. The boy looked at his mother, a flicker of understanding passing between them. He climbed down normally, but the incident left Victoria shaken. We can't stay here, she murmured. It's not safe for them anymore. Sarah squeezed her friend's hand. The facility in Colorado is almost ready. State-of-the-art security, completely off the grid. We can. She was cut off by the sudden appearance of Emma, who materialized beside them with unnatural quietness. Mommy, the little girl said, her eyes wide and serious. The sad man is coming back. He's bringing others with him. Victoria and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. Emma's premonitions had never been wrong. When, sweetheart? Victoria asked, trying to keep her voice calm. When is he coming? Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. Soon. Very soon. And he's angry, Mommy, but also scared. Victoria pulled her daughter close, her mind racing. Sarah, initiate Protocol Darkwing. We leave tonight. As they gathered the children and hurried from the park, Victoria's phone buzzed. A message from Raj. Ross Enterprises filed for emergency custody hearing. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. Victoria's heart pounded. They were out of time. That night, as the city slept, a private jet took off from a secluded airstrip. On board, Victoria held her sleeping children close, her eyes fixed on the fading lights of New York. I'm sorry, Alexander, she whispered to the darkness, but you have no idea what's really at stake. As the plane banked west, heading towards the Rocky Mountains and the promise of sanctuary, Victoria allowed herself a moment of doubt. Was she doing the right thing? Running from the man she once loved, the father of her children? But then Ethan stirred in his sleep, a soft blue glow emanating from his fingertips, and Victoria's resolve hardened. Her children were more than just the product of a miraculous conception. They were the next step in human evolution, and she would go to any lengths to protect them. Little did she know that at that very moment, in a high-security lab in London, Dr. Blackwell was staring at genetic test results that would change everything. The true nature of the twins' DNA was about to be revealed, and the world would never be the same. As dawn broke over the Rockies, Victoria Chan and her extraordinary children disappeared into the mist, leaving behind a maelstrom of questions, accusations, and a desperate father just beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had lost and what he now sought to reclaim. Mommy, why are the trees singing? Emma's small voice broke the silence as they stepped out of the helicopter. Victoria knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Emma's eyes, wise beyond her years, scanned the forest. "I can hear them. They're happy we're here." Before Victoria could respond, Ethan tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, look." He pointed to a nearby stream where fish leapt in graceful arcs, their scales glinting in the sunlight. "I can feel their thoughts." Sarah, who had been overseeing the unloading of their equipment, exchanged a worried glance with Victoria. The twins' abilities were evolving at an alarming rate. "Let's get inside," Sarah suggested gently. "We have a lot to set up." As they entered the state-of-the-art facility, hidden beneath the rustic exterior of a mountain lodge, Victoria's phone buzzed. "A message from Raj. Ross in uproar. Court issued warrant for your arrest. Custody battle going public." Victoria's heart sank. She'd known this was coming, but the reality of it still stung. "Victoria," Sarah's voice was low, urgent. "We need to start the next phase of testing. If the twins' abilities are advancing this quickly—" "I know," Victoria interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "But they're not lab rats, Sarah. They're my children." "They're more than that," Sarah pressed. "They could be the key to unlocking human potential. The next step in evolution." Victoria watched as Emma and Ethan explored their new surroundings, their movements almost preternaturally graceful. "And what if they don't want that responsibility?" Before Sarah could answer, alarms blared throughout the compound. Security feeds flickered to life on nearby screens, showing a fleet of black SUVs winding up the hidden access road. "How did they find us so quickly?" Victoria gasped, fear gripping her heart. Ethan appeared at her side, his small hand slipping into hers. "The sad man is here, Mommy. He's scared and angry, but he misses us." Victoria's mind raced. How could Alexander have tracked them here? Unless— Sarah, she turned to her friend, realization dawning. The Genesis Protocol. It wasn't just about fertility, was it? Sarah's guilty expression confirmed her suspicions. It was meant to create a connection, a biological link that could transcend normal human limitations. Victoria finished, the pieces falling into place. Like a homing beacon, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. On the security feeds, they watched as Alexander stepped out of the lead vehicle, his face a mask of determination. "Mom," Emma's voice was calm, belying the gravity of the situation. "It's time to stop running." Victoria looked at her children, then back at the approaching forces. In that moment, she realized that the true battle wasn't against Alexander or the world that sought to understand their miracle. It was against fear itself, fear of the unknown, of change, of the incredible potential that her children represented. "You're right," she said softly, kneeling to embrace Emma and Ethan. "No more running." As the sound of footsteps echoed through the compound, Victoria stood tall, her children at her side. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The door burst open, and Alexander stood framed in the entrance, his eyes locking with Victoria's. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Victoria," he breathed, his gaze moving to the children. "What have you done?" Emma stepped forward, her small hand outstretched. "Hello, Father. We've been waiting for you." In that instant, as Ethan's fingers began to glow with an ethereal light and Emma's eyes shimmered with otherworldly wisdom, it became clear to everyone present that the future of humanity stood before them. The question was, were they ready for it? The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only determine the fate of this extraordinary family, but potentially reshape the very fabric of human existence. And as the Montana sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, the true magnitude of the journey ahead began to unfold. "How?" Alexander's voice cracked with emotion. "How did you know I was your father?" Ethan spoke up, his voice carrying a wisdom far beyond his years. "We've always known. We felt you, even before we were born." Victoria's heart raced as she watched the interaction. This was the moment she had both dreaded and, deep down, longed for. The reunion of a family torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Alexander knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the children. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "If I had known." Emma placed her small hand on his cheek, and suddenly the room was filled with a warm, golden light. Alexander gasped, his eyes widening in wonder. "What's happening?" he breathed, looking to Victoria for answers. "They're showing you," Victoria said softly, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Everything you missed. Everything they are." The light pulsed, and images flashed through Alexander's mind. The twins' birth, their first steps, the manifestation of their extraordinary abilities. He saw Victoria's tireless devotion, her fears, her hopes. He felt the love that had nurtured these miraculous children. As the light faded, Alexander stood shakily, his world forever altered. "Victoria," he turned to her, his voice thick with emotion. "What have we created?" Before she could answer, Sarah stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "Mr. Ross, the twins are more than just gifted children. They represent a quantum leap in human evolution. Their DNA is a perfect fusion of both parents." A new voice interrupted. Dr. Blackwell strode into the room, flanked by security personnel. "But it's more than that. The Genesis Protocol didn't just cure infertility. It unlocked dormant potential in human genetics." Victoria moved protectively in front of her children, her eyes flashing with anger. "You have no right to be here, Jonathan. This isn't your discovery to claim." On the contrary, Blackwell smirked, producing a stack of legal documents. "Ross Enterprises owns the patents on the Genesis Protocol. These children are, legally speaking, the property of the company." Alexander whirled on his former colleague, fury etched on his face. "How dare you? These are my children, not some lab experiment." Emma's voice cut through the rising tension like a bell. "We belong to no one but ourselves." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the twins. Ethan nodded in agreement with his sister, a faint blue glow emanating from his skin. "Mom, Dad," Ethan said, his voice oddly mature, "it's time for you to understand what we truly are." The twins joined hands, and suddenly the air in the room seemed to vibrate with energy. Holographic images appeared, showing DNA strands, cellular structures, and cosmic phenomena that defied explanation. "We are the bridge," Emma explained, her eyes glowing with an inner light, "between what humanity is and what it could become. Your love," Ethan continued, looking at his parents, "combined with the Genesis Protocol, didn't just create life. It opened a door to the next stage of human evolution." Victoria and Alexander moved closer together, instinctively reaching for each other's hands as they watched their children unveil the truth of their existence. Dr. Blackwell stepped forward, his scientific mind racing with the implications. "This is beyond anything we could have imagined. The potential applications are not yours to decide," Victoria said firmly, finding her voice. "Whatever happens next, it will be on Emma and Ethan's terms." Alexander nodded, squeezing Victoria's hand. "We've made mistakes, both of us. But from this moment on, we stand united. For our children, and for the future they represent." As the holographic display faded, the twins turned to face the adults in the room. Their eyes held a depth of knowledge and understanding that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "The choice is yours," Emma said softly. "Will you fight over us? Or will you work together to help us fulfill our potential?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. In that moment, Victoria, Alexander, Sarah, and even Dr. Blackwell realized that they stood at a crossroads of human history. The decisions made in this hidden compound would ripple out to affect the entire world. As night fell over the Montana wilderness, the extraordinary family and their unexpected guests grappled with the weight of their newfound knowledge. The future of humanity lay in the balance, and the path forward was anything but clear. Little did they know that beyond the walls of the compound, other forces were already mobilizing. Forces that would stop at nothing to control the power that Emma and Ethan represented. The true test of their unity and of humanity's readiness for the next step in evolution was only just beginning. Emma and Ethan, despite the late hour, showed no signs of fatigue. They stood by the large window, their small silhouettes framed against the majestic Montana landscape. "We can't keep them hidden forever," Alexander said, breaking the tense silence. "The world will find out eventually." Victoria nodded, her eyes never leaving her children. "But we need to protect them. The moment the public learns about their abilities—" "It won't just be the public," Dr. Blackwell interjected, his voice grim. "Governments, corporations, religious organizations. They'll all want to claim Emma and Ethan for their own purposes." Sarah leaned forward, her face etched with concern. "We need a plan, a way to introduce them to the world on our terms." As the adults debated, Emma turned from the window, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "It's already too late," she said softly. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the young girl. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Victoria asked, her heart racing. Ethan joined his sister, a faint blue aura surrounding him. "They're coming. We can feel them." Alexander stood, moving to the security monitors. "Who's coming? I don't see anything on the—" His words trailed off as the screens suddenly flickered to life, showing multiple aircraft approaching from all directions. Military helicopters, private jets, even what looked like experimental craft. "How is this possible?" Dr. Blackwell exclaimed, staring at the displays in disbelief. "This facility is supposed to be undetectable. They followed the energy signature," Emma explained calmly. "Our energy. It's like a beacon to those who know how to look." Victoria and Alexander exchanged panicked glances. "We need to get you out of here," Victoria said, moving towards the twins. But Emma and Ethan stood their ground, a serene confidence emanating from them. "No, Mom," Ethan said, his voice carrying a strength that belied his years. "This is where we need to be." "It's time," Emma added, reaching for her brother's hand. As their fingers intertwined, the air around them began to shimmer with an iridescent light. The adults watched in awe as the twins' power manifested visibly. The light expanded, enveloping the room and then pushing beyond, spreading out over the landscape. Outside, the approaching aircraft suddenly halted in mid-air, as if frozen in time. "What are they doing?" Sarah whispered, her scientific mind struggling to comprehend what she was witnessing. "They're making a choice," Alexander realized, his voice filled with wonder and a father's pride. "For all of us." The light continued to spread, reaching out across the country, then the continent, and finally encompassing the entire globe. In homes, offices, and government buildings around the world, people stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to an inexplicable feeling of connection and possibility. In the compound, Emma and Ethan turned to face their parents, their eyes shimmering with power and knowledge beyond their years. "We've given humanity a glimpse," Emma said softly. "A glimpse of what?" Victoria asked, tears streaming down her face as she felt the enormity of what her children had done. "Of what we could become," Ethan answered. "Of the potential that lies within each person. The choice of whether to embrace it or fear it. That belongs to everyone now." As the light began to fade, the twins swayed slightly, the effort of their global revelation taking its toll. Victoria and Alexander rushed forward, catching their children in a tight embrace. "What happens now?" Alexander asked, looking from Emma and Ethan to the stunned faces of Sarah and Dr. Blackwell. "Now," Emma said, her voice tired but resolute, "we face the world together, as a family, as humanity's bridge to its future." Outside, the frozen aircraft slowly came back to life, but their approach now seemed less threatening and more curious. The world had changed in ways that were yet to be fully understood. As the sun fully rose over the Montana wilderness, casting a golden glow over the compound, the extraordinary family stood together, ready to face whatever came next. They had revealed their existence to the world, and in doing so had set humanity on a new path, one of untold challenges and infinite possibilities. The true journey, they all realized, was only just beginning. A sea of faces stretched out before them, journalists, government officials, curious onlookers, all drawn by the inexplicable global phenomenon that had occurred just hours ago. The air crackled with tension and anticipation. Victoria squeezed Alexander's hand, her heart pounding. "Are we really ready for this?" she whispered. He met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the same mix of fear and determination. "We have to be, for them." As they approached the microphones, Emma tugged gently on Victoria's sleeve. "It's okay, Mom," she said softly, her eyes wise beyond her years. "We'll know what to say." Ethan nodded in agreement, a faint blue glow pulsing beneath his skin. "Trust us." The crowd fell silent as the family took their places. Camera flashes exploded in a dizzying array, and the world held its breath. Alexander stepped forward first, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, we stand before you today to introduce you to the future of humanity." Victoria joined him, her chin held high. "Our children, Emma and Ethan, are more than just prodigies. They represent the next step in human evolution, a bridge between what we are and what we could become." A murmur rippled through the crowd. In the front row, Dr. Blackwell and Sarah watched intently, their scientific curiosity warring with their personal investment in the twins. Emma stepped up to the microphone, her small frame barely visible above the podium. Yet when she spoke, her voice carried across the gathering with uncanny clarity. "We know you're afraid," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Change is always scary. But what we showed you earlier wasn't just a glimpse of our abilities. It was a mirror, reflecting the potential that lies within each of you." Ethan joined his sister, the two of them standing united. "We're not here to rule or to frighten. We're here to guide humanity towards a future where the barriers between mind, body, and spirit no longer exist." As the twins spoke, a soft glow began to emanate from them, growing in intensity. The crowd gasped as holographic images appeared in the air, showing DNA strands morphing and evolving, neurons firing in complex patterns, and galaxies swirling in the vastness of space. The Genesis Protocol, Ethan continued, wasn't just about curing infertility. It was the key to unlocking dormant genes, abilities that have been sleeping within humanity for millennia. Emma picked up the thread. "But this gift isn't just for us. It's for all of you. The choice to evolve, to grow beyond current limitations, belongs to each individual." The holographic display shifted, showing people from all walks of life, their bodies illuminated with the same ethereal glow that surrounded the twins. Victoria and Alexander watched in awe as their children commanded the attention of the world. They had known the twins were special, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. Suddenly, a voice cut through the awed silence. "This is blasphemy." A man in clerical attire pushed his way to the front. "These children are an abomination, a threat to the natural order." Before security could intervene, Emma turned her gaze to the man. With a gentle smile, she extended her hand. "Your fear is understandable, but unnecessary. Let us show you." As her fingers touched the man's forehead, he gasped, his eyes widening in wonder. The anger drained from his face, replaced by an expression of profound understanding. I see," he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "It's beautiful." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the man who had been ready to condemn the children now embraced them, his body shaking with emotion. Ethan addressed the gathering once more. "We don't seek to replace your beliefs or change who you are. We're here to help you become the best version of yourselves." As the twins finished speaking, the glow surrounding them pulsed outward, washing over the crowd in a wave of warmth and possibility. People gasped, some laughing, others crying, as they felt a connection to something greater than themselves. Victoria stepped forward, her voice thick with emotion. "We know this is a lot to process. There will be questions, concerns, and yes, even opposition. But we ask for your patience and open-mindedness as we navigate this new frontier together." Alexander joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Our children are a gift, not just to us, but to all of humanity. And we promise to do everything in our power to ensure that this gift is used responsibly for the betterment of all." As the family stood united before the world, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in a golden light. It was a new dawn, not just for the Rothschild family, but for all of humanity. In that moment, watching her extraordinary children and the man she had once lost but now stood beside, Victoria realized that their journey was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and opposition, but also with unimaginable possibilities. Victoria smoothed down Emma's dress, her hands trembling slightly. "Remember, sweetheart, you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with." Emma smiled up at her mother, a wisdom beyond her years shining in her eyes. "It's okay, Mom. We know what needs to be done." Alexander paced the room, his face etched with concern. "The security out there is unlike anything I've ever seen. Are we sure this is safe?" Ethan, who had been quietly observing the city skyline, turned to his father. "They can't hurt us, Dad. But more importantly, they won't want to once they understand." A knock at the door silenced the room. Sarah entered, her lab coat replaced by a smart business suit. "It's time," she said softly. "They're ready for you." As they walked down the long corridor towards the General Assembly Hall, Victoria felt a mix of pride and fear. The twins, barely 4 years old, were about to address the leaders of the world. The fate of humanity's evolution hung in the balance. The massive doors swung open, revealing a sea of faces representing every nation on Earth. The room fell silent as the family made their way to the podium. Victoria and Alexander took their places slightly behind the twins, a united front facing the world. Emma spoke first, her voice clear and strong despite her small stature. "Distinguished leaders, we stand before you not as a threat, but as a bridge to humanity's future." Ethan continued, "We know there are fears, concerns about genetic superiority, about the balance of power. But what we offer is not dominance. It's awakening." As they spoke, a soft glow began to emanate from the twins, filling the room with a warm, comforting light. The world leaders leaned forward, captivated. "The Genesis Protocol," Emma explained, "is not just about creating children like us. It's about unlocking the potential that lies dormant within every human being." Holographic displays sprang to life around the room, showing intricate DNA structures and neural pathways. Ethan gestured to the images. "Every person in this room, every human on this planet, has the capacity for extraordinary abilities. We are simply the key to unlocking them." A murmur ran through the assembly. The representative from China stood up, his face a mask of skepticism. "And who controls this key? Who decides who gets these abilities?" Victoria stepped forward, her voice steady. "That's why we're here today, to propose a global initiative, overseen by an international committee, to ensure fair and ethical distribution of the Genesis treatment." Alexander joined her, adding, "We're not here to create a race of superhumans. We're here to elevate all of humanity." Together, the room erupted in a cacophony of voices, questions, concerns, and exclamations of wonder. Emma and Ethan exchanged a glance, then joined hands. The glow around them intensified, and suddenly, every person in the room felt a surge of connection. For a brief moment, the world leaders experienced a taste of what the Genesis Protocol could offer: enhanced cognitive abilities, physical improvements, and a profound sense of unity with those around them. As the sensation faded, the room fell into an awed silence. The Secretary General, visibly moved, approached the podium. "I think I speak for all of us when I say, we have much to discuss." Hours later, as the sun set over New York City, the family stood on the balcony of their hotel suite. The world below buzzed with the news of the historic UN session. Victoria leaned into Alexander's embrace, watching Emma and Ethan play quietly nearby. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she whispered. Alexander kissed the top of her head, his eyes never leaving their children. "I think we've given humanity a chance to become something greater." Ethan looked up from his game, his eyes glowing softly in the twilight. "It's just the beginning, Dad. The real work starts now." Emma nodded in agreement, a serene smile on her face. "But we won't be alone. The world is waking up, and we'll guide them. Together, As night fell over the city that never sleeps, the Rothschild family stood united, facing a future bright with possibility and fraught with challenges. They had opened Pandora's box, unleashing humanity's true potential. What came next would reshape the very fabric of civilization. The journey of Emma and Ethan, the miracle twins born of science and love, was far from over. In fact, it was clear that their greatest adventures and greatest tests still lay ahead. The dawn of a new era for humanity had begun, and they were at its heart. Victoria Chun Ross, now the head of the International Genesis Initiative, strode purposefully down the marble hallway, her heels echoing in the cavernous space. Alexander fell into step beside her, his face a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, squeezing her hand. Victoria took a deep breath, steadying herself. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Where are the twins?" "Already in the chamber. You know how they like to make an entrance." As they approached the grand doors of the assembly hall, a hush fell over the crowd. Victoria's heart raced, remembering the tumultuous years that had led to this moment, the breakthroughs, the setbacks, the global debates on the ethics of human enhancement. The doors swung open, revealing a sea of faces from every corner of the globe. The center of the room, Emma and Ethan stood on a raised platform, no longer the small children who had first captured the world's attention, but poised pre-teens on the cusp of adolescence. Victoria and Alexander took their seats as the Secretary General stepped up to the podium. "Distinguished delegates," he began, his voice grave, "we gather here today to make a decision that will shape the future of our species. The Genesis Protocol has been refined, tested, and proven safe. The question before us now is, do we take this leap into humanity's next evolutionary stage?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emma and Ethan exchanged a glance, then stepped forward in perfect unison. "Before you cast your votes," Emma's voice rang out, clear and strong, "we ask that you allow us to show you the true potential of what the Genesis Protocol offers." Ethan continued, "Not just enhanced physical and mental capabilities, but a deeper connection to each other and to the world around us." As they spoke, a soft glow began to emanate from the twins, growing in intensity until it filled the entire chamber. Gasps of wonder echoed through the hall as delegates found themselves experiencing a taste of enhanced perception. Colors became more vivid, sounds more nuanced. Each person felt a profound sense of connection to those around them, transcending language and cultural barriers. In that moment, Victoria felt a surge of emotion, pride in her children, hope for the future, and a twinge of fear at the enormity of what they were unleashing. As the glow faded, Emma addressed the assembly once more. "What you've just experienced is only a fraction of what's possible. But with great power comes great responsibility." Ethan nodded solemnly. "The choice to evolve must be made freely by each individual, and safeguards must be put in place to prevent misuse." The chamber erupted in discussion, delegates turning to one another with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Victoria leaned towards Alexander, whispering, "This is it. Everything we've worked for." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the building. Security personnel rushed into the room, their faces grim. "We have a situation," one of them announced. "There's been a breach at the primary Genesis research facility. Someone's trying to steal the protocol." Victoria's blood ran cold. They had always known there were those who would stop at nothing to control the power of Genesis. But to attack now, at this crucial moment, Emma and Ethan's eyes met, a silent communication passing between them. Without a word, they joined hands, their combined energy creating a shimmering force field around the chamber. "Mom, Dad," Ethan called out, his voice strained with effort, "we can hold them off, but not for long." Alexander was already on his feet, coordinating with security. "We need to evacuate the delegates. If the protocol falls into the wrong hands." Victoria stood, addressing the stunned assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are under attack by those who would use Genesis for their own gain. The future we've worked towards hangs in the balance. We need your decision now before it's too late." As chaos erupted around them, delegates shouting and security personnel rushing to secure the exits, Victoria locked eyes with her children. Emma and Ethan stood firm, their young faces set with determination, holding back the tide of those who would steal humanity's future. In that moment, with alarms blaring and the world teetering on the edge of a new age, Victoria realized that the true test of Genesis and of humanity itself was only just beginning. The power to evolve was within their grasp, but so too was the potential for unimaginable destruction. As she rallied the world leaders to action, Victoria silently prayed that the faith she had placed in humanity's potential would prove justified. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of Genesis, but the very course of human history. Alexander approached, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Any word from the twins?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria shook her head, her heart heavy with concern. "Nothing since they left to confront the intruders at the research facility. I can feel them, Alex. They're alive. But something's different." As if on cue, the large screen at the center of the room crackled to life. Emma and Ethan's faces appeared, their expressions unnaturally serious for children their age. "Mom, Dad," Emma began, her voice tinged with an emotion Victoria couldn't quite place. "We've contained the threat, but there's something you need to see." The camera panned out, revealing the devastation at the research facility. Scorch marks and debris littered the area, evidence of a fierce battle. But it was what stood behind the twins that made Victoria's breath catch in her throat. A group of adults, their eyes glowing with the same ethereal light that Emma and Ethan possessed, stood silently. Some looked confused, others frightened, and a few looked exhilarated. Ethan spoke next, his voice steady but strained. "The intruders, they weren't trying to steal the Genesis protocol. They were trying to use it on themselves." A collective gasp rippled through the command center. Victoria felt Alexander's grip on her shoulder tighten. "Are you saying?" Victoria began, her mind racing with the implications. Emma nodded solemnly. "Yes, Mom. They succeeded, at least partially. We're dealing with the first adult Genesis subjects, and we don't know how stable they are." One of the world leaders stepped forward, his face pale. "This changes everything. If the protocol can be weaponized like this, it wasn't meant to be used this way." Ethan interjected, a flash of anger in his eyes. "The Genesis protocol is about evolution, not destruction." But in the wrong hands, Victoria's mind whirled with the potential consequences. The carefully laid plans for controlled, ethical implementation of Genesis were crumbling before her eyes. "What do we do now?" Alexander asked, voicing the question on everyone's minds. Emma and Ethan exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. When they turned back to the camera, their eyes shimmered with a determination that seemed far beyond their years. "We adapt," Emma said firmly. "The world needs to know what's happened here. We can't hide the truth any longer." Ethan nodded in agreement. "And we need to accelerate the Genesis program. Not as a weapon, but as a safeguard. Humanity needs to be prepared for what's coming." Victoria felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. Her children, barely on the cusp of adolescence, were shouldering a burden that could reshape the course of human history. "You're right," she said, straightening her shoulders and turning to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, the situation has changed, but our goal remains the same. We must guide humanity through this transition, no matter the cost." As the world leaders began to debate the next steps, Victoria turned back to the screen, her eyes meeting those of her extraordinary children. "Emma, Ethan," she said softly, "are you ready for this? The world is about to change in ways we can't even imagine." The twins smiled, a mixture of wisdom and innocence that never failed to take Victoria's breath away. "We were born ready, Mom," Emma replied. "It's why we're here," Ethan added. "To be the bridge between what humanity is and what it can become." As the sun finally broke over the horizon, bathing the room in golden light, Victoria felt a shift in the air. The dawn of a new era had truly begun, bringing with it challenges and possibilities beyond anything they had anticipated. The Genesis protocol was out in the world now, for better or worse. And as Victoria looked at her children's determined faces on the screen, She knew that the true test of their family, and of humanity itself, was only just.